still going to reference the hardest questions on the exam, but knowing the hardest question is not good enough, right? It's knowing the hardest type of question and how to target that type so you can actually know multiple different types of questions, not just a hardest question on one exam. And knowing the type is going to instantly boost your score, right? Because once you know the strategy to fight that type of question, then you have a good understanding of how to do that and you practice it. That's how you actually boost your score, right? So here are the methods I use to solve the hardest problems, my specific strategies. And I know they work because I teach them and they work for other people. And I use them when I was taking my SAT. And that's why I was able to get them correct. So hi, I'm Karthik. These are 3 of the hardest SAT questions in every section. All right. So the reading question, right? The hardest question, I believe, is the paired evidence type. Not only because it's a huge time suck for most students, but also just because it's 2 different portions of the question. So you have to get, if you get one instantly wrong, then the other one is immediately thrown off course. And it's basically, if you get one wrong, it's so difficult to actually get both correct. And it's the idea that they're both related that makes them have even more weight than other questions, right? Because you're actually just answering 2 at the same time instead of just like 1 on 1, right? So it's like a double point. The idea that I use, right, is because the portion of like the answers, right? So first you get 4 questions, and then the next question is like find the evidence for that question, and you get 4 more choices, right? The issue with me reading the evidence first, right, in which I recommended that previously because it works for other students, but for me personally, the problem that I get reading the 4 evidence parts is I read one and it convinces me of one of the previous answer choices, right? So the first idea is you need to have the frame of the passage in mind. You need to have read the whole passage because the frame of the passage tells you the general sentiment towards each one of the answers. You're already going to be able to eliminate some of the answers just because of the frame of reference of one of the questions, right? So figuring the first thing you should do is read the first set and eliminate the ones that you know cannot be correct. They're immediately wrong, right? Then you want to reference evidence, right? So look at all the evidence points and see if any of them like directly correlate with any, right? So the goal here for any sort of reading question, right, is sort of to look at the idea of what is explicitly correct, right? So there's going to be one quote that explicitly proves another, and it's just a matter of finding that, right? So what you want is a very strong connection and correlation from one quote to one answer choice, right? So if you have one quote and let's say, oh, it like supports both of these like evenly, it's probably not the right one. You're looking at something incorrect because the correlation is too loose. You need to find a strong correlation, and that's with the exact text, right? So that's pretty much the strategy for these paired evidence types, right? You'll see a question and then you'll see the idea that like, oh, it's pointing towards evidence, like the answer choice B very strongly. That's the one that it probably is, right? So I didn't think that was good enough, right? I didn't think that that one type of question was good enough. So here's another type of question that specifically like references the same concept, and it's the making assumptions or inferences questions. And you'll see these types of questions show up as like the 3 out of 3 hard difficulty in like your QAS answer key, right? And the example of it is like, by saying this line or this passage or this paragraph, the narrator most likely means this, or is assuming this, or is like trying to convey this idea. And understand that it's never an inference. It's never going to ask you to assume something, right? And this is like for these long passages, it's never going to assume something that is not referenced in there explicitly or heavily shown to be true, right? You're never going to have to come up with something and justify it with the passage. The passage is going to give you what that is, right? So it's never a complete inference. What you need to do is look for the connections of the line or a referenced area. So basically, the line or paragraph that they're going to reference, if it's an entire paragraph, it probably doesn't reference the entire previous text, but it references like some of the ideas of previous paragraphs, right? But if it's just a line, right? So if they say like line 61, by saying this in line 61, the narrator most likely means this of this person, right? They want you to actually reference more than just that line because they want you to get the context of the line so you can better understand the question. So figure out the context is actually 50% of understanding it. So you need to figure out the line itself, deeply analyze analyze that, but also what does that have to do with the rest of the paragraph, right? What does that line in reference to the rest of the paragraph actually mean or actually tell you, right? The meaning is always related to the position of the text. So never isolate your quote or isolate your portion to figure out what it is, right? The second thing is like what you want to do with that information is then use the portion that we talked about previously, which was the idea that you have to look at everything with this accurate perspective, with this idea that the text must completely say this and not say anything else or anything new or anything different, and the question answer choice that I pick must be explicitly correlating with that and not give anything extra or anything new that is not referenced directly in that quote or the text. If you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to use your ear, right? And it's not that much of a strong concept in like reading as much as it is in grammar, using your ear. If you've ever heard me talk about grammar before, I talk about how using your ear is so bad, but using your ear means something a little differently in reading. It's this idea that you're going to read an answer choice and you're going to convince yourself of that answer choice without explicitly referring back to the passage and see if it supports that, right? Because it's very easy to read an answer choice and think, the author actually might agree with this portion. It might agree with this. Like, I think this might actually be correct, but you're not referencing the passage again, and you realize that they never explicitly say that, right? So if you take away anything from both of these examples, is that the explicitness of how the answer choice relates to direct quotes in the passage and direct lines that you can reference that instantly tell you that it's correct. If you don't have that, then it's probably not correct. Or honestly, it's definitely not correct if you can't find that. Okay, grammar, I set it up into two parts again because I felt like one wasn't solid enough. And the first concept is just like difficult grammar questions, right? So I was going through some old exams to make this video, and I found questions that were like 3 out of 3 difficulty. And when I looked at them, they were just, I expected them to be long and wordy questions based on like paragraph sentence order or, like transition words, set this up for the next paragraph, right? But they were actually just grammatical concepts, right? That just had weird phrasing. But I was able to get them like within seconds, like within under 30 seconds, I was able to just instantly get the right answer. And I was like, okay, it's definitely C. All those other ones don't work. I look at the answer choice, it's C, and I'm surprised because I thought the question would try to trick me because it's 3 out of 3 difficulty. There's only like 4 3 out of 3 difficulty questions on the grammar portion. So I figured out, why is that the case? Why am I able to get these very difficult questions correct the most? And it's because those grammar rules that are on the SAT are ingrained in my head so heavily. I've had so much experience, not only with the exam taking them, but teaching them to other students, that every single one of those grammar rules is just ingrained in my head. I couldn't forget it even if I wanted to. So if you have a 3 out of 3 difficulty question, that's just testing like commas, like independent dependent clause, like the one that I specifically looked at that I was so surprised that I got instantly correct, that wasn't a trick or something, was just one of those questions where it had an independent clause, a comma, and another independent clause, so that it didn't combine them both. Like, you can't just combine them with a comma. So all I needed was a comma and a fanboys added, and the other two were added like therefore and added one other word that wouldn't have worked because it's not in fanboys, right? Because you need a comma and a fanboys to combine 2 independent clauses. It was when I like realized, I was just like, I just know the grammar rules so well that I knew those other 2 couldn't be it. And I instantly identified that one was independent and the other was also independent, right? So I didn't use my ear. I instantly figured out the rule and I knew the answer. So if you're having trouble with those types of grammatical concepts, it's because you don't know the concept well enough. You need to memorize that concept. You need to learn it. Go to Khan Academy, learn it as soon as you get it wrong, because that is going to save you so much points and so much wasted effort just practicing this mindlessly, because if you don't know the rule, you're not going to get it right. Okay, the second portion is the actual like difficult question, is the best setup for information / best transition words, right? So an example would be like, what is the thing that provides the best transition information for the previous paragraph, or best sets up the information for the next paragraph and the passage, right? So basically with that idea is, in both of those examples, notice how they say in the previous paragraph. Best sets up the information in the paragraph and in the passage, right? What they're looking for is they've actually given you a magnifying glass. What they've done is they say like, hey, pick a phrase that highlights all of this. So you need to read all of that and come up with something that actually references it, right? So when they say information in the previous paragraph, your transition phrase or your phrase should reference the things that are in the previous paragraph, right? Properly flow the ideas from the previous paragraph to now. So you need to fully understand what the main idea of the previous paragraph is and then create a proper transition, right? So many people look at this and just try to figure out the best transition, but don't realize that the question isn't about the transition. Every one of those answer choices, they could be a transition. They could be an accurate transition itself, right? What they're actually looking for is, can you find the transition that actually relates to the main idea of the previous question? It's a main idea question disguised as a transition words question. So anytime they have that thing that's like in the previous like in reference to the previous passage, in reference to the main theme of the passage, in reference to the previous paragraph, that's what you're looking for, right? Okay, math, right? This is the same concept of grammar, right? If you watch a lot of my videos, you'll notice that math and grammar have such a strong reviewing slash concept overlap. But basically, non-word problems, right? So I'm talking about free response word problems, the one where you just have to write the number. The non-word problem versions of these questions, they just test if you know the math concept, right? So again, if you don't know the math concept, you're not going to be able to solve it no matter how much practice you do. So save yourself the mindlessly practicing the same type of question, and just like, let's say it's like a circles question, and I just forgot the formula or I don't know how to like do it properly. Watch difficult examples of it online and see how they do it. Figure out the method, write down the method explicitly, memorize the method, and then start practicing. That's going to boost your score so much more, right? But for free response word problem applications, right, where you have complex word problems of concepts you already know, you need to use this framework to actually destroy the context of the word problem, right? Because word problems are just equations in a longer format, right? So first, find all the variables, find every missing portion and how they relate to each other. Visualize and write down if it's a problem that's like visual, right? So if it's like an algebraic problem or you're finding something missing, obviously it's just the variable and you can't write or draw anything, right? Except for the fact that like this happens when this happens, right? That's the only thing you potentially write down. But if it's, let's say it's like a sphere question, right? So a common question that I've actually gone over on this channel before is like, there's like one sphere and there's another sphere that's like two times the radius. What is the difference in the area, right? Or actually I think it was like eight times the difference in area. What is the difference in the radius? And I obviously just gave you the answer there, right? So visualize it, right? So visualize what actually changes in the formula. So first, like the thing you would write down is the formula itself for the volume of a sphere, and then visualize exactly like what is happening. It's just increasing, right? The only thing that you can really change in a sphere is the radius. That's the only like variable that you can change, right? So see if you can use those ideas to figure out the unknown, right? So what you want to do is list everything that the information like of the word problem gives you into known categories and unknown. So let's say like height of the tree, and let's say that's an unknown, it will go to unknown category. Let's say like how big the tree is this year and how big the tree is the year before, right? That would be, and let's say they explicitly give us that and they're trying to tell us like what is the tree going to be at this year, right? So the two pieces of information we know and two that's unknown. And let's say we also know that it like follows a quadratic model of growth. That's something that we know, right? And then this is where you want to apply the method. So now when I know all the known informations, the variable, and I understand how the problem works, I can just apply the mathematical concept, right? If you can't apply the mathematical concept instantly, like you don't know exactly what to do instantly, then your problem isn't in the mathematical concept. It's still in figuring out what the math is. If you don't know what the math is just from the problem and you have every piece of information, then you have the problem that I described previously, which is that you don't know the math concept itself, right? But if you do understand the math concept, but you don't know how it applies to this problem, what you need to do, you're still stuck, is reference this idea of going through the sorting process again, right? So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the word problem and I'm going to highlight every single piece of information. And then I'm going to go through this process again of finding every variable, listing portion, see if there's anything new that you missed. And then if there's nothing new that you missed from the problem itself, by underlining every single piece of information that they give you, the next thing you want to do is figure out if you can push everything from your unknown pile to your known pile with formulas and equations that might not be getting you to the answer, but are just pushing everything into the known pile. And then from the knowns, you can find the answer. That's pretty much the only way to encounter these word problems, because if you do know the concept and you apply this framework, you're going to be able to get every single word problem right. So if you don't know already, I have SAT community scholarships, right? So my SAT community is a program where I just like essentially teach these kinds of things with like a one-on-one setting in multiple times a week, right? As many times as you want. And I'm always available for calls and messages, just for essentially anything that you want to learn on the SAT and for college, right? And I'm offering free access to that, right? There's only one day left. That's the application deadline. So hopefully you can submit your application before it ends. And I'm essentially opening that, and it's a chance to work for free, right? You're able to be in that community and work with me on your SAT until your final SAT, right? Until the last one that you're taking for free in that community. So the link is in the description to apply. There's only 10 spots left, and the person I'm looking to accept is a person that I know can take full advantage of this opportunity. So thank you guys so much. Link in the description to apply, and I hope you learned something today.